good to be back.
It's great for you to be back.
For us. Naming, the naming power.
Yeah.
I like that. And you know, this, the message today goes a lot with what some of the things that were said here. We can use that. And you know, I think about when you talk, Dennis, and you started it with a great thing. Is I don't want this to be negative. And you know, I thought about it. You know, a lot of things are how we name it. Is it negative? Is it positive? Is it a lesson? You know, whatever. And even though we know that in Unity, and I am huge on, you know, it's so easy to blurt things out and to go back to just the way we are, you know, the way we say things before stopping and thinking and being aware. And, you know, obviously this week has been a whole roller coaster ride from Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock and, you know, yeah, we're having it. No, we're not. Yeah, we're having it. No, we're not. And it was one, you know, thing after another. And I had to, you know, keep present and have other people remind me, you know, that, you know, watch how you name things. You know, basically watch how you name things. Because, as Charles Fillmore says, and as it said in the Bible, you know, Adam was given the power to name all things, and that's what they became. And we don't think about that. We think, oh, giraffes, zebra, how did you come up with those names? It's not the names of the animals, but it's the name that we give it, the consistency or the substance, the essence, it's the essence that we name something. That's what it becomes. And, you know, I was reminded about this too. When I went in, my son-in-law called me Thursday morning. She was finally ready. She had the Pitocin over the night. She's ready to push. And he said, you know, send out a text to everybody else, you know, don't come in. Well, she's pushing, but don't come in because we don't know how long it's going to be. You know, we don't want everybody waiting in the waiting room. So he called me though and he said, Ricky would really like if you'd be there, just that she knows you're there, you know, in case she needs you. So I said, I would, yeah, definitely, I want to. So I rush in there. So I'm in there like from 10 o'clock in the morning, Thursday morning, and then she ran into some issues. They stopped the Pitocin and stopped her labor because of some things that she ran into. So I got a chance to go in and see her, and I said, you know what, I should have brought a book. I didn't think about it. I didn't think I was going to be in there that long. And she had this baby book. It was baby's first year. And it was like huge.
Yeah,
and I did get chapters 1 through, or weeks 1 through 6. Totally read. But it went through, you know, what to expect from the baby, what mother should expect. And, you know, it was all like down-to-earth stuff, you know, with good tips and everything. There was something that really amazed me in this book. And I thought, that's it. That's my message on Sunday. And it talked about colic, baby colic. We all know what baby colic is, right? If we didn't have a baby with colic, we've heard about babies with colic. You know, so what is very interesting is it pointed out in this book, which this book is not metaphysical, it's not new thought, it's not anything, it's just a baby, you know, a baby book. But they talked about colic and what colic was. And I looked up baby colic, also known as infantile colic, defined as episodes of crying for more than 3 days, 3 hours a day, for more than 3 days a week, for 3 weeks, or an otherwise healthy baby, between the ages of 2 weeks and 4 months. And that shrill cry, yeah, oh, they got colic, oh my God. And what do people feel when they bring their baby home? Oh, I hope my baby's not colicky. I've heard stories of colic. You know, and I thought about that too. The stories about labor, the stories about delivery. And my daughter is an internet reader, and she got scared of everything. And everything that she was scared of, she experienced. But, you know, it says the cause of colic is generally unknown. Fewer than 5% of infants with excess crying have an underlying organic disease. So, it went on in this chapter of the book to talk about colic. And what amazed me was they pointed out that there's some countries that don't even have a name for colic, a name for the baby infantile colic. There's no name for it. And why is there no name for it?
They don't have it, it doesn't exist.
Their babies don't exist. They exhibit it.
Wow.
They don't have infantile colic. And they said they looked at that. Why wouldn't there be a name for this in a lot of the Eastern countries? Why wouldn't there be a name for colic, that is synonymous with infantile colic. Now they have colic, they have like renal colic and stuff because, you know, there's other different kinds of colic, but not infantile baby colic. And they figured it out, it's because the baby is held almost all the time in those societies. And if you think about it, I talked to Diane, she said, think about it, they're held. They're held. They're held. And, you know, she said, think about it, you know, a lot of, you know, the native countries and stuff, they carry their babies on the carriers, they're being held, they're close to the chest, they're close to that human interaction. So they took this and they said, wow, that's really interesting. Could that be it? And so they did a study with parents that they asked a parent to hold their baby three hours longer each day than they normally would, and the crying subsided 43%. Holding the baby only 3 hours more. That's huge. That's huge. That's huge. And you know, so we think about, well, you know, some parents do hold their child, that are colicky. Of course, we know they give them love and stuff. However, think about, we've already named it. We've already named it. We fear it. It's in our mind. It exists. And I think about that. They don't have a name. It doesn't exist. Wow. I mean, that is really huge when you think about that. That's really huge. And so, you know, I thought about the power, again, the power of naming. And, you know, Charles Fillmore writes in the thing about Genesis, you know, man has power to name all ideas that are presented in his conscious mind, whether they come from within or without. But again, once they are named, they become that. They become that. So, you know, and again, I think about, we're so eager to name experiences good, bad, negative, whatever. You know, when really they're lessons. And, you know, that was a big thing too with conscious parenting, is, you know, always to stay in the moment and beware of how we name things. You know, how we name things to our kids, how we name experiences, how we name people, how we name whatever. And, you know, I think about, and I thought about all the different things that really shows that. You know, it shows that and has proven that over and over and over, and the power of what we say and how we name things and how we act. So, you know, I thought about that, classroom in 1968. It was 1968. It was after, and it explains this. And it was like one, and this is true. They did the story. I have two different stories that I'm going to read. All the stories that I'm saying I know are verified true because they were looked at as separate. But this one is true because it was on like really on requested back episodes of something. I'm not sure, but they did a presentation on this lady that she had. It said one day after Martin Luther King was murdered in April 1968, Jane Elliott's third grade class from a small all-white town in Iowa came a class confused and upset. They recently had made King their hero of the month, and they couldn't understand why someone would kill him. So Elliott decided to teach her class a daring lesson in the meaning of discrimination. She wanted to show her pupils that what discrimination feels like and what it can do to people. So she divided the class between the brown eyes and the blue eyes. And has anybody ever heard of this story? It's
Maybe that was over.
Did you hear it on Oprah?
Yeah.
And it's incredible. It's incredible. The one day she would make the blue eyes perfect. She would say about how smart the blue eyes are. And they actually showed video. I've actually seen video on this, and this is incredible. You know, she stood up in the front. She said, somebody would answer, and then she said, "That's dumb, but his brown eyes. We know that's why."
Oh,
you know, and stuff like that. I mean, she really got into it, you know. And so, and it said she would give the superior students more recess. She would tell them how smart they are, how we don't like the other people with their eyes and stuff like that. And she said it was amazing. Just that one day of planting that seed, when they would go out from recess, they would start to brew blue eyes and brown eyes. And she said that, you know, and they even went back and interviewed, it was a program that they went back 14 years later and interviewed the kids that were in that class. about how that felt. And they said they couldn't believe it, that, you know, somebody that was their best friend, they were starting to have feelings about that they didn't know if they wanted to be their best friend anymore because of their eyes. And they never had known discrimination before until that was planted so strongly that these are people that we don't like. Frontline was the big. Frontline was the TV show that did the whole thing. But Frontlines, and the thing was it was called A Class Divided. I forget. You know what? And you can. It's a long. No, it's not that really that long. You know what? I can actually read it. It says, on the first day, the blue-eyed children were told that they were smarter, nicer, neater, and better than those with brown eyes. Throughout the day, Elliot praised them and allowed them privileges such as taking a longer recess and being first in the lunch line. In contrast, the brown-eyed children had to wear collars around their necks until their behavior and performance were criticized and ridiculed by Elliot. On the second day, the rules were reversed, and the blue-eyed children were made feel inferior, while the brown eyes were designated the dominant group. What happened over the course of the unique two-day exercise astonished both students and teachers. On both days, children who were designated as inferior took on the look and behavior of genuinely inferior students, performing poorly on tests and other work. In contrast, the superior students had been sweet and tolerant before the exercise, became mean-spirited, and seemed to like discriminating against the inferior group. I watched what had been marvelous, cooperative, wonderful, thoughtful children turn into nasty, vicious, discriminating little third graders in a space of 15 minutes, says Elliot. She says she realized then that she had created a macronism of society in the third grade classroom. Elliot repeated the exercise with her new classes in the following year. This is the third time in 1970 cameras were present. And then that was the group that 14 years later, Frontlines, A Class Divided, chronicled a mini reunion of the 1970 third grade class. As young students, Elliot's former students watched themselves on film and talked about the impact Elliot's lesson in bigotry has had on their lives and attitudes. It is Jane Elliott's first chance to find out how much of her lesson her students had retained. Nobody likes to be looked down upon. Nobody likes to be hated, teased, or discriminated against, says Berla, one of her former students. Another, Sandra, says Elliott, you hear these people talking about different people and how they'd like to have them out of the country. And sometimes I just wish I had that collar in my pocket. I could whip it out and put it on and say, wear this, and put yourself in their place. I wish they would have to go through what I went through at that time. In the last part of the A Class Divided, Frontline cameras follow Jane Elliott as she takes her exercise to employees in Iowa prison system. During a day-long workshop in human relations, she teaches the same lesson to adults. Their reaction to the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercises are similar to those of children. And this was like employees, like the employees, not into the prison, but the employees. After you do this exercise, when the debriefing starts, when the pain is over, and they're all back together, you find out how society could be if we really believed all this stuff that we preach. If we really acted the way that we feel as good, if we acted that way, you could feel as good about anyone as those kids could about each other after this exercise was over. You create instant cousins, says Elliott. The kids said over and over, we're kind of like a family now. They found out how to hurt one another, and they found out how it feels to be hurt in that way. And they refused to hurt anyone else again. That's huge.
Wow.
In the third grade class. And what really amazes me is how easily it's taught and how easily it's picked up. In that one day, they picked that up. And they were exhibiting that behavior. And those kids, and how much those kids became what they were labeled. And I had for the parenting class, I had, and it's hanging out there about, what we live, we become. We become over and over and over. And it's because, and it's the thoughts, it's all the thoughts in our head. What's our world? How we live in our world? How we live in our job? How are we labeling our spouse? How are we labeling our children? How are we labeling the world? How are we labeling the others? You know, and who are they? It's incredible. And, you know, over and over and over again, and over and over and over again, we read these stories and they do these experiments, yet, you know, what can we do to counteract that? You know, what can we do to counteract that other than become conscious and awake? And realize and really incorporate. And the thing is, you know, and I think, as I'm off here, I did a conscious parenting, I loved it, and I think I want to do another workshop and series, whether it's one class or whatever, and it'll be, you know, coming up really shortly on the principles of unity. And the deep principles are, you know, our thoughts create our lives. You know, because we have to be aware and then we have to live it. It's not a matter of that. It's everything that we say, you know, becomes. So, you know, I find myself, you know, going on to people about, you know, Ricky's experience and stuff. And I say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to hold that onto her. I want to have it, it's a great experience and only see it as that. You know, even what was past can stay in our experience if we keep dwelling on it. You know, it's what we say and how we say it. Exactly. And you said it when you came up here to light the candle. You said, I want to be careful. That was a perfect interlude. I want to be careful about how I say this and how much I dwell on this. Because there's something, it's a matter of what we look for. Happiness Project is working on going into schools and doing a school program. And, you know, we're looking for exercises like the silver lining, helping kids find something that's good in situations. There's another class exercise I want to read to you that is incredible, but it's like totally the opposite of the first one. So it's called an unforgettable class exercise. One day, and this is also true too because they tracked down the teacher that did it. And you know what, I'm going to give it, there's two versions of it. I'm going to give a short version. One day, a teacher asked her students to list the names of the other students in the room on two sheets of paper, leaving a space between each name. Then she told them to think of the nicest thing they could say about each other, each of their classmates, and write it down. It took the remainder of the class period to finish their assignment, and as the students left the room, each one handed in the papers. That Saturday, the teacher sat down and wrote the name of each student on a separate sheet of paper and listed what everyone else had said about that individual. On Monday, she gave each student his or her list. Before long, the entire class was smiling. Really? She heard whispers, I never knew I meant that to anyone. I didn't know that others thought so much of me, were most of the comments. No one ever mentioned those papers again in class. The teacher never found out if they discussed them after class or with their parents or whatever happened in the matter. The exercise had accomplished its purpose. The students were happy with themselves and with one another. That group of students moved on. Several years later, one of the students was killed in Vietnam, and his teacher attended the funeral of that special student. She had never seen a serviceman in a military coffin before. He looked so handsome and so mature. The church was packed with his friends. One by one, those who loved him took one last walk by the coffin. The teacher was the last one to bless the coffin. As she stood there, one of the students, who acted as a pallbearer, came up to her. Were you Mark's math teacher? He said. She nodded yes. Then he said, Mark talked about you a lot. After the funeral, one of Mark's former classmates, some of Mark's former classmates got together at a luncheon. Mark's mother and father were there also, waiting to speak to the teacher. We want to show you something, his father said, taking a wallet out of his pocket. They found this on Mark when he was killed. We thought you might recognize it. Opening the billfold, he carefully removed two worn pieces of notebook paper that had obviously been ripped, folded, taped, and refolded many times. The teacher knew, without looking, that the paper were the ones that she had listed all the good things each of Mark's classmates had said about him. Thank you so much for doing that, Mark's mother said. As you can see, Mark really treasured it. All of Mark's former classmates started to gather together. Charlie smiled rather sheepishly and said, I still have my list. It's on the top of my drawer, it is in the top drawer of my desk at home. Chuck's wife said, Chuck asked me to put it in our wedding album. I have mine too, Marilyn said, it's in my diary. Then Vicky, another classmate, reached into her pocketbook, took out her wallet, and showed her warrant and frazzle to the group. I carry this with me at all times. Vicky said, without batting an eyelash, she continued, I think we all saved all this. Tears rolled down the eyes of the humble teacher. We encourage so many people in our lives, and it's a precious joy to see the good in all of our journeys. We have a choice every day by the words that we speak. And I like this one thing, it says, are you a bucket filler? Or a bucket, a bucket empty, or a poker, poke a hole in the bucket. Because each time we say something great to somebody, each time we do say words of appreciation, words of encouragement, when we have those uplifting words, we fill that bucket up. We have the power also to poke the holes in the bucket. And it's a matter of being aware, to stop and to think. Become conscious. Become aware of how powerful our words are. Because our words are the creator. Our thoughts create, and then our words make it solid. Basically, if our thoughts are created, our words make it solid. It puts it out there. And I think about these two stories, and they're both two true stories. And the impact, both teachers made an impact in a powerful way. Even the impact that she taught them about discrimination, it was in a powerful, powerful way. Because through that lesson, they learned the power of love, rather than the power of discrimination and the power of hate. So, we can take that and say, that was a huge lesson. It was a lesson. I think, we need to look back on our history and say, let's take those lessons and let's learn from them. In our own personal history, and the history of our country, the history of our world. We have all this fighting and everything because somebody's labeled. Somebody's labeled what, good, bad, wrong, right. And that word went out and it became that. And now we've got to stick to our guns and hold on to that. But it's a matter of seeing the good, calling it good, and seeing that and believing it. I thought about bringing the medical book with all the ICD-9 codes in it, which is huge. And I think about how many diseases did we make in that book. Yeah. Really, we created every one of them. We created every one of those diseases in that book. And once we created it, we labeled it, we gave it a number, we gave it symptoms, and now we're living them. And the power of the carnal mind, or the power of the, what's the word I'm thinking of? The world,
Creation?
No, the mind that everybody has. Like the
Collective
collective, the power of collective consciousness. It's huge. However, you know what? We're very powerful on our own. We can, on our piece of the world, we can make that change. And as we make that change, it makes huge changes around us. So it's time to start calling things what they are. And what is it? Everything from God is good. So everything, if we call everything God, we call everything good. We start seeing that, and it starts becoming that. And as it becomes that, we live that. And so it is. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Is there any discussion?
It was Jane Ellen who did an experiment on Oprah.
Did she?
That was her that did this. Yeah.
But Jane Elliott was actually there, the lady?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it got vicious in that audience because they separated the brown eyes from the blue eyes. And the blue eyes got like all the treats, and they got like the coffee, the donuts, and
gosh.
it got ugly.
Wow.
It got downright ugly, yeah.
Wow. Wow.
It did, yeah.
And that's incredible that's incredible too that she could take it into employees and make that difference at an audience and make that difference.
Yeah. They didn't know
They
what
knew
was
what it
going on.
was. I mean, they knew it was
Yeah,
an
yeah.
experiment.
No, they didn't.
Oh, they didn't, oh, they didn't
had no
know, they didn't
idea.
know who she was.
Oh, audience
Because
had
you know
no
what,
idea.
really,
They were offended, they were highly upset, they had no idea. Yeah, they just like, you over here, you over here, I mean, she was direct and kinda like, you know, she
wow.
wasn't licensed, she was
And
saying.
you know what, and it probably, if anybody would say, you know, her guest today is Jane Elliott, or they might not even know who her guest is. But
Yeah,
right.
you would know that.
Yeah.
You would know that, and that, wow, I can see that would,
Yeah.
yeah. And especially if she's up there saying, listen, they have done experiments that, and I think, and I saw that with the employees. She actually said, you know, they have done experiments that, you know, blue-eyed people are smarter. They are absolutely smarter, you know, and she really made it sound real, so that, you know, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. People in the audience, isn't that how she did it?
Yeah, people were really, they were offended.
I think you're being biased, you're blue-eyed.
That's not true. Brown eyes are smarter.
Brown-eyed people are more articulate, calmer, they're so much more smarter.
They have better visionaries.
I understand and appreciate that you have reason for thinking that. Respectfully, we'll agree to disagree.
What happens to the poor Hazel?
Yeah, right, Hazel and green eyes, yeah. Well, they're really out.
Well, recessive, I would say recessive goes with the blue, yeah.
Yeah, I agree,
Recessive
yeah.
goes with the blue. But and think about the power of that exercise. In that audience, how easily it is for people to become unconscious and to feed into it. Powerful, powerful, powerful.
I was gonna say two things. The first, I can't think of the last name, but it's Maya Angelou, thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Maya.
Yeah.
She said that people may not remember always what you say or what you do, but they will remember how you made them feel. And that's a really true statement, because
Yeah.
passion and feeling of how you make people feel is really true. And I had an incident, and it happens a lot, I don't know why. It's like when I'm working with people, somehow occupations come up, and this lady, she was so vibrant. She was telling me where she works. She really likes this restaurant. She really likes her customers and everything. She goes, but I'm just a waitress. And I'm like, I'm writing, and this is like bothering me.
Yeah,
And she's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
but I'm just a waitress. But she was talking about how much passion, how she loves going to work. And I said, you know, at the end of the letter, I said, you know, that is great. It seems like you really enjoy your job and you're good at what you do. I said, so I never want to hear you say, I'm just a waitress. I said, because you're not just a waitress. I said, you're giving a lot of, you know, people like come in with a bad day, and you're giving them something to eat, and, you know, making their day. I said, you know, I really thought, she was, I don't know why I said that. I said, because you're not just a waitress.
Yeah.
You're so,
Yeah, she probably affects a lot more people every day. Think about it.
Yeah,
All
think of the
people
people
she
that she
serves,
could,
all
the
the
people
people
she
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 serves.
said that, you know.
Yeah.
I had a guy one time said, oh, I'm just a janitor, I just do. And I said, well, you're not just a janitor.
Yeah.
You're keeping that building sparkling clean.
Phil the janitor,
And, who's,
that's the story Gordon said, Phil the janitor.
oh, okay, yeah, that's right, I remember. And you know what, and yeah, I know janitors that, oh my God, the kids in school love the janitor.
Yeah.
My daughter had a janitor
Oh
in
my
high school
God.
that day, everybody loved him, he was so cool in all ways and stuff like that. But it's a person that
How
can
you
take
live
that and
yourself.
know that their life is, you know, what their life is there for. You know, they're happy by bringing up other people, not by putting other people
Well, what I
down.
was getting at is how we label things and other people.
Mhm.
Sometimes we label ourselves with bad things.
Yeah.
We're our own worst enemy,
Yeah.
and what we tell ourselves and name things about ourselves. And I feel so great about that teacher, because yesterday my girlfriend was her 60th birthday, and she's introduced me. It's funny how someone else introduces you. So then you know, she goes, now, this is my friend Joy. I know her for years. She may not look really smart, she goes. And I'm thinking, and I looked at her, I started looking, I said, oh, well, thanks, Kathy. She goes, well, you know what I mean. You don't wear glasses, and you're kind of short. I'm like, oh, what's the matter?
Great.
I just laughed and laughed at that, because I was thinking, oh, is that what it was?
It's just
It
hard.
was funny how people, and then we were laughing because when she would go around each person, how she would intro them, and then the girl side, she goes, oh, I'm scared, and she comes to me.
Watch out.
That is good. Oh my God, that's a,
And I said, yeah, because we all know that people that are smart would be tall and wear glasses.
Yeah.
Golly.
And forget how this goes, I hope I get this right. You take on the persona, you take on the essence of what the most important person thinks you are when you're a child. Meaning, as parents and stuff like that, most people, and because I remember Tony Campolo used this example, and he said, who should be the most important person in your life? Your inner self.
Right.
Your inner self. So you should really look at yourself, start looking at yourself the way your inner self looks at you. And you're perfect. They look at you like you're perfect. You know, but people take on, you know, first it's their parents. You know, then it might be a spouse or whatever. And they take that on to themselves, that they are what that other person, you know, mirrors to them what they are. And that's why, you know, it's so easy for, you know, parents that are frustrated, teachers and stuff like that, to put something on and, you know, or to say something to kids and how that sticks. Yeah.
Teachers are big too, really big.
Yeah,
influences.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Friends, you know, when they get upset, you know, the teasing, the name calling and stuff like that. It is. It's a matter of, you know, being able to rise above that for ourselves. Being able to rise above that for ourselves.
A couple months ago, you talked about injecting humor in our lives.
Yeah.
Trying to laugh 14 times a day.
Yeah, good. You counted that. Good.
So with that in mind, let's have a little fun with this. We talked about teachers and parents and outside influences, and you know how teachers can really have
Yeah,
an
that a
influence.
lot of influence.
You know, when people look at me and say, "What the hell's the matter with you?" I tell them, I went to Catholic school for 16 years.
That was explaining it.
The nun made me do it. The nun made me do
There's
it.
an overwhelming amount of negativity in those two buildings that I went to. 3 buildings. Yep. Put that to bed in
Yep, there you go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's what we are. It's what we are today. And move
Yeah.
forward. And that's the whole thing. And that's the whole thing is we have that opportunity right now to rename things. Just because they were named before and they're in our lives, it doesn't mean that we don't have that power. Also, we have that creative power going on all the time. We don't have to feed into it, and we don't have to rename it.
I've named it as an interesting experience, an educational experience.
Yeah,
An
yeah,
experience that's for chaos.
yeah, exactly.
And it gives you that contrast to see how good things are now.
Yeah,
That you have this other awareness, right?
I'm around the great people these days.
yeah. And you know,
I mean that.
Listen, you're outnumbered by other women. You think you
yeah,
can
they
say
say
something?
yeah.
You watch Survivor.
Maybe he's the only guy.
It's not a gender thing.
You're trying to put us on. I get it.
It's not a gender thing.
I'm only kidding.
I'm glad we came back to that, yes. Yes, there's one other thing I want to say, but I totally forgot it, but anyways. Okay, let's take these thoughts into a little meditation, and as we close our eyes, I want you to feel the joy and the laughter and the feeling that we've just shared. And make that your world. Make that your life. Know that everything is from God, and everything from God is good. If there's anything that's troubling you now, any situation that you're having trouble with, a person, a group, a situation, I invite you to rename it. Then get first lessons, and then invite it to move on. Don't allow it to have power in your life. Realize that we are here to grow, to learn, to evolve into higher spiritual beings. And make a commitment to look at life as good, as beautiful, as whole, as perfect. And know that that is what life from all those that your words have uplifted. Take time to love yourself. See yourself truly, how your inner being sees you. Perfect, beautiful, and alone. Shall become. As we hold on to these feelings, know that as we leave this room, we become Adam. The power to name our experiences, the power to name our life, the power to name those around us. And as we create that name, it becomes it. So as we leave this room, make a commitment to be ever aware of what names we hand out. Our world is good, beautiful, awesome. And so it is. So I'd like you to come back into this room at any time, feeling that power,